So, my name is Diana Cummings, and thank you all for coming to Nichols Village. We are here to watch Beth Blanchard and Peter Van in the trials of Susan B. Anthony. And this is part of the celebration to honor Women's History Month. And some of the other events we are having this month as part of our Caleb's Crossing with the Groveland Gathers to Read this coming Saturday at 11 a.m. We are having Christina Hodge from the Peabody Museum at Harvard University come, and she is going to talk about the Harvard Indian College back in the 1660s, and also how it is today when they are doing archaeological digs, and that should be a fantastic talk. It's from 11 to noon. And another thing, on the 1st of, actually, it's on Monday, we're going to be having, I'm having a walk.
Christine Gordon.
Christine?
Isn't it Christine Gordon?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's Catherine Gordon.
Could be.
I think. Coming to do Mistress Bradstreet, talk about her book. And that will be at the library, 6:30. So, and I wanted to let you know that this play is about 40 minutes. It's in 3 parts, and there'll be a short little pause between the 2nd and 3rd part, just for a brief little costume change. So, so I welcome you all and enjoy the play. Thank you.
I had always fought for the abolition of slavery and for the equal rights of the Negro. But after the Civil War was over, I was forsaken by William Lloyd Garrison and other abolitionists whose cause I had tirelessly championed. I was told the time was no longer right to fight for women's suffrage. But the most maddening and agonizing betrayal of all came from my good friend, Frederick Douglass, the same Mr. Douglass who delivered the eulogy at my father's funeral. The final blow came at a meeting of the American Equal Rights Association, which Mrs. Stanton and I had formed to gain the vote for everyone, Negroes as well as women. It hurt so much to hear his words.
I don't see how anyone can pretend there's the same urgency in getting the vote for women as there is in getting it for the Negro. For us, it is a matter of life and death, especially in those states of the former Confederacy. When women, because they are women, are dragged through the streets of New York and New Orleans, hanged upon the nearest lamppost, when they have the houses burning down all around them, when the babies are snatched from their arms and the brains dashed out on the cobblestones, then and only then will I concede to you that it's the same urgency in getting the vote for the women as there is in getting it for the Negro.
Mr. Douglass, are not all these outrages applied to Negro women as well?
Of course, but it's because they are Negroes, not because they are women. Sure, I believe in the woman's right to vote. And yes, there was a time, it still is a time, when Negro can barely find a place to lay his head. And there were many nights when this woolly head of mine, yes, found refuge in the houses of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony. But 4 years of Civil War and centuries of oppression give precedence to the Negro.
The question of precedence has no place on an equal rights platform. If, however, you wish to talk about precedence, if you will not give the whole loaf of justice to the entire people, but if you are determined to dole it out piece by piece, then give it first to the women, at least to the most educated and capable women thereof.
Would you
For
agree,
after all, in the present state of government, it is intelligence, it is morality which is sorely needed.
Oh, would you require a test of morality and intelligence before allowing one to vote?
I allowed you to finish, Mr. Douglas. Please give me the same courtesy. The reason men don't understand us women is they think of us the same way that slaveholders used to think of their slaves, all love and compassion with no malice in their hearts. In the same way, men consider us women as poor, lovable creatures, kind and docile, unable to take care of ourselves, and dependent on the compassion of men.
I've never characterized women in that way.
I have the floor, Mr. Douglas. There is not a woman born whose bread is not earned by another. It does not matter whether that other is husband, mother, father, brother, or friend. Her whole moral being is in the power of that other. When Mr. Douglas claims that the cause of the black man is so perilous, ask him if he would not exchange his sex and color with that of Mrs. Katie Stanton.
Would you allow me a question?
Anything for a fight today, Mr. Douglas.
Well, with regard to the women getting the vote, would that change anything with regard to the sexes?
Oh, yes. It will change the nature of one thing very much, and that is the pecuniary position of women. It will put women into the position where they can earn their own bread, so that they could go out in the world in an equal footing in the struggle for life, so that they shall not be compelled to take those positions that men choose to accord her, and then take such pay as men choose to give her. But the business of this association is to demand for every man, black or white, and every woman, black or white, that they be this instant enfranchised and admitted into the body politic with equal rights and privileges. Mrs. Stanton and I and others would soon leave the American Equal Rights Association and form the National Women's Suffrage Association. But I never did abandon my demands for racial justice.
In 1872, Miss Anthony read the following from her Rochester newspaper.
Register now. Today and tomorrow are the remaining opportunities. If you were not permitted to vote, you would have to fight for the right, undergo all privations for it, face death for it. You have it now for the cost of only 5 minutes' time to be spent in seeking your place of registration and having your name entered. Register now.
That was all she needed. Miss Anthony recruited her 3 sisters, and all 4 of them went to a nearby barbershop and presented themselves to 3 young registrars, 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat.
You know, this newspaper says that we can register to vote, and we're not leaving here until we do so.
The young registrars at first appeared to be amused, but that expression changed to bewilderment when they realized that Miss Anthony was serious.
You know, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution says all citizens have the right to vote, and we are citizens, ergo we vote.
All of the registrars were almost half of Miss Anthony's age.
You know, there's nothing about gender in the 14th Amendment, nor in any other part of the Constitution.
More and more, the 3 young men had a pleading look in their eyes, pleading that one of the other ones would know what to do, or better yet, pleading that Miss Anthony and her sisters would just go away.
Well, we can wait. We can wait all day if we have to.
The 2 Republican registrars frantically whispered to each other.
Have you youngsters figured it out yet?
One of the young men finally gets the courage to speak. Well, I guess there's no harm in you ladies registering.
That's more like it. Hannah, Mary Gromit, step right up now.
A few days later, on Election Day, Miss Anthony wrote to her friend and fellow crusader, Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
Well, I have gone and done it. Positively voted the Republican ticket straight this AM at 7 o'clock and swore my vote in at that time. All my 3 sisters voted. Not a jeer, not a word, not a look disrespectful.
The fact was that Susan B. Anthony's voting had won immediate response from the press in all parts of the country. Republican newspapers were mostly friendly. The New York Times boldly declaring,
"The act of Susan B. Anthony should have a place in history."
the Chicago Tribune stated that
Miss Anthony should hold public office.
but the political cartoonists had a field day, caricaturing her unmercilessly. Democratic newspapers followed the lead of the Rochester Union and Advertiser, which flaunted the headline,
"Female lawlessness?" Miss Anthony's lawlessness had proved women to be unfit to vote. Ugh.
Nothing happened for 2 weeks, and it looked like Miss Anthony's voting would be overlooked amidst the euphoria of President-elect Grant's victory. Then a U.S. Deputy Marshal rang the doorbell. When Miss Anthony greeted him, he seemed embarrassed to announce that he had come to arrest her.
"Is this your usual manner of serving a warrant?"
The Deputy Marshal nervously thrust out the arrest warrant and suggested that she should, in the next day or so, report to the United States Commissioner.
"I shall not go of my own free will. You must command me. Take me yourself. Here, I insist you handcuff me as you would any other common criminal. Don't be shy now."
The marshal, knowing when he was beat, escorted her out of the house. On the streetcar, the conductor asked for her fare. In response, Miss Anthony announced loudly,
"I'm traveling at the expense of the United States government. This gentleman here is escorting me to jail. Ask him for my fare."
The deputy turned scarlet. Later on December 23, 1872, Susan was directed to the Rochester's Common Council along with her sisters. People expecting to find loud, rebellious criminals were surprised to find dignified, middle-aged women. One newspaper reported,
"The majority of these lawbreakers were elderly, matronly-looking women with thoughtful faces, just the sort that one might like to see in charge of one's sick room, considerate, patient, and kindly."
all except Miss Anthony settled out of court. A few days later, Miss Anthony was indicted on the charge that she
"Did knowingly, wrongfully, and unlawfully vote for a representative in the Congress of the United States." Oh.
Her trial was set up for May 13, 1873. Up until then, Miss Anthony was technically in the custody of the U.S. Marshal, although she traveled extensively on the lecture circuit from Boston to Chicago, Buffalo to Washington. Her speeches were entitled,
"Is it a crime for a citizen of the United States to vote?"
and
"The United States on trial, not Susan B. Anthony."
Miss Anthony would use passages from the Declaration of Independence and the preamble to the Constitution to her advantage.
"It was we the people, not we the white male citizens, but we the whole people who formed this union. And we formed it not to give the blessings of liberty to half of ourselves and to half of our prosperity, but to the whole people, women as well as men." It was in the backdrop of these demands that I was taken to trial on June 17, 1873.
The question, gentlemen of the jury, is solely a question of law, based on none other than the Constitution of the United States. Now, Ms. Anthony claims that the 14th Amendment protects her, but it does not in any way do that. In fact, it in no way authorizes her to have made the vote of November last. I am right in this, and therefore I direct you, gentlemen of the jury, to find a verdict of guilty.
What outrageous! Judge Hunt had ruled that I could not speak in my own behalf, and then directed the jury to find me guilty. Not only that, but he refused to allow the jury to be polled. But wait till you hear what happened the second day.
The prisoner will please rise. Do you have anything to say?
Well, yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. For Your Honor's ordered verdict of guilty against a citizen of the United States for exercising that citizen's right to vote has trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights, my judicial rights have all been ignored. Robbed of the fundamental privileges of citizenship, my status has been degraded from that of citizen to that of subject. And not only myself individually, but every member of my sex has been doomed to political subjugation at the hands of this so-called Republican government.
The court cannot listen to a restatement of an argument that counsel has already delivered 3 hours in giving yesterday.
May it please the court, Your
No,
Honor.
it doesn't please the court.
I am not arguing the question, but simply stating the reason why sentence cannot be pronounced against me. Your denial of my citizen's right to vote is a denial of my right to representation as one of the governed. It's a denial of my right to consent as one of the taxed. It's a denial of my right to a trial before a jury of my peers as an offender against the law. And in essence, it's a denial of my sacred rights to life, liberty, property.
The court cannot allow the prisoner to go on.
But, Your Honor, may it please the court to remember, since the day of my arrest, November last, neither I nor any member of my disenfranchised class has had the opportunity to utter one word of defense before judge or jury.
The prisoner must sit down. The court cannot allow this to continue.
Had Your Honor submitted my case to the jury, which you did not do, and clearly it was your duty to do so, even then I should have just cause for protest. For not one man of that jury was my peer, but rich or poor, white or black, educated or ignorant, awake or asleep, sober or drunk, each and every man of them was my political superior, hence, in no sense, my peer.
The court must insist the prisoner has been tried according to established forms of law.
Well, yes, Your Honor, but all forms of law, made by men, administered by men, interpreted by men, in favor of men and against women. Hence, Your Honor's ordered verdict of guilty against a citizen of the United States for that citizen's exercising their right to vote just because that citizen is a woman and not a man is indefensible.
The court orders the prisoner to sit down.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, the prisoner will stand for sentencing. The sentence of the court is that you pay a fine of $100 plus the cost of prosecution.
But, Your Honor, I shall never pay a penny of this unjust penalty. All the stock and trade I possess is a $10,000 debt incurred while I was publishing my newspaper, The Revolution, the sole purpose of which was to educate all women to do precisely as I have just done, and that is to rebel against your man-made, unjust, unconstitutional forms of law and to continue to adhere to that fine old revolutionary maxim, resistance to tyranny is obedience to God.
The court shall not require imprisonment pending the payment of the fine.
Indeed, I never did pay that $100 fine. My intent, of course, was to provoke the court into putting me into jail. By purposefully ignoring my non-payment, the court deprived me of a national spectacle. That is, it denied me the opportunity of making my point from inside a jail cell. That refusal to put me in jail was the last step in a long manipulative process that legally thwarted me from appealing my case to a higher court. For indeed, I had imagined taking my case all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. Now don't get me wrong. That trial generated lots of favorable publicity, and I would use bits and pieces of that trial's transcript in my speeches for the next 33 years. I didn't realize it was you who was going to be interviewing me. Why, you're only a boy.
Miss Anthony, if you would rather that I get somebody else.
No, that's all right. I remember now. Sarah said it would be you. You're her grandson, Malcolm, right?
No, ma'am, it's Matthew.
Well, you work for the Chronicle. You better get it right.
Well, if you'd rather somebody older
Oh,
come.
no, that's all right. Newspapers haven't always been kind to me, but I remember now. Sarah said your writing talents and your politics were satisfactory. I guess I'm a bit unsettled after losing Mrs. Stanton. I've progressed from the sad stage to the irritable stage. You know, it's been more than a week since her funeral, and I still can't believe she's gone. If I had died first, she would have thought of the most beautiful phrases to describe our friendship, but I'm afraid that I cannot put it into words. You know, she was the writer for both of us.
What do you remember about Mrs. Stanton?
Oh, I remember so many things. Well, there was this one time I was positively desperate for her help. Now, mind you, she had 6 children, the youngest of which was only 6 months of age. Oh, mercy. Makes me realize how selfish I was. Anyways, I wrote her this frantic letter. I wonder if it's here. You know, Ida knew you were interviewing, and she had many things she thought you might be interested in. Oh, here it is. My dear Mrs. Stanton, I have not a word written on that address for the teachers' convention. So for the love of me and the saving of the reputation of womanhood, I beg you, with one baby on your knee and another at your feet, the 4 boys whistling, buzzing, hallooing, ma, ma, set yourself about the work. It is of but small moment who writes the address, but of the vast moment that it be well done. Oh my, how embarrassing to read that in front of you. How selfish I was. Well, maybe it would help you to understand the background. I had been lobbying the state teachers convention for 3 whole years for the opportunity to give a speech. They finally decided in the affirmative. And I froze. My mind wouldn't work. That's why I was so desperate.
Was Mrs. Stanton able to help?
Oh, you know, she wrote right back. She was always so punctual. There's probably something in here. Oh, here. My dear Miss Anthony, your servant is not dead, but liveth. Imagine me day in and day out, watching, bathing, dressing, nursing, and promenading the precious contents of a little crib in the corner of the room. I pace up and down these 2 chambers of mine like a caged lioness. Now, is your speech exclusively on the point of educating the sexes together, or as to the best manner of educating women? I will do what I can to help you. So, I showed up at her door, suitcase in hand, and we got right down to work. For days, we talked and read and argued and cried and laughed and discussed and wrote and crossed out and wrote some more. And every 5 minutes, one of her youngsters would appear with a wet diaper or a bloody nose or a tummy ache. Now, I had the facts, but Mrs. Stanton knew just how to arrange them into sentences and paragraphs. I tried to conjure up my saying Mrs. Stanton's words before a critical crowd of men. We finished educating the sexes together just in time. The point of that speech was to challenge the commonly held notion that female brains were smaller and therefore weaker than male brains. You can imagine how well that went over.
How did you and Mrs. Stanton meet?
It was at an anti-slavery meeting in '51. William Lloyd Garrison was the speaker. Someone introduced us afterwards. I'm afraid I can't remember much more than, oh wait, now I remember. It was Amelia Bloomer.
Amelia Bloomer?
That's right, Amelia Bloomer.
She invented bloomers.
Well, she did not. Well, she popularized them and wrote about them in her newspaper. But what would you know about bloomers anyways?
Grandma Sarah told me all about them.
Oh, that's right. Sarah is the best storyteller in Western New York. I'm sure she's told you all about them.
It was a short skirt with pantaloons underneath, correct?
Well, I wouldn't put it like that. But, well, yes, it was a short skirt with pantaloons underneath. The point was you didn't have to wear these long skirts which would get wet and muddy in the summer and then cold and frozen in the winter. You wore the pantaloons instead, which worked the same way that men's pants did. And of course, that was the problem. Beyond that, people were positively scandalized by the short skirts that we wore over them. Never mind that our legs were completely covered, and heaven forbid that we should wear anything both practical and comfortable. We were laughed at, mocked, and ridiculed by men and women alike. Male Betties, they called us.
Male Betties?
Well, yes, that's what they called us when we were wearing our bloomers. Or is that what they called the men who supported us? I think they were the male Betties. Well, anyways, it got to be so people were paying more attention to what we were wearing than what we were saying.
Miss Anthony, can you tell me about what it was like in your family growing up?
Oh my. Now you're really going to tax my memory. I remember the school days. For the longest time, I didn't realize how lucky I was. I thought all girls got an education. For that matter, I thought all women had a voice in their church, not just us Quakers. You know, My father was insistent that all 4 of us girls got the highest quality education. And because of my father, at the age of 12, I became the first female spooler in the mill. Even my mother thought that job should be saved for the boys.
Grandma said you didn't crusade for women's rights right away.
Well, that's right. At first, I was very active in the temperance movement. I would see all those drunkard husbands on their way home, and then I realized that their wives couldn't divorce them because all the divorce laws favored the men. You know, even if a woman brought property into that marriage, that property and the children would always go to the husband. That's why I became so determined to campaign for women's rights. Mrs. Stanton's and my first big victory was the Married Women's Property Rights Law of 1860. It gave certain divorce rights to the women of Western New York. For example, they could hold property in their own name, and they had joint custody of the children.
Grandma said that you went to a lot of conventions.
Oh, yes. I remember one convention in particular. There was a group of women there in low-neck, short-sleeved blouses and outrageous shades of pink and blue. And that reminds me of another story. Well, anyways, the poised and dignified Lucretia Mott was elected president, and that prevented those hussies from taking over. You must think I was intolerant of them. Well, I was. I still held that strict Quaker attitude that only whores would dress like that.
What was the story?
What story?
The story that you were going to tell me about those inappropriately attired women?
Oh, leave it to a man to remember a comment like that. It reminded me that in my adolescence, I had fallen into the temptation of purchasing a Scotch plaid coat. And then a big dog sunk his teeth into it. And I was positive that the tear in that coat was God's punishment of me for the obvious pride I took in wearing it. But back to the convention. I was elected secretary. I remember that because it was very important to me. The newspapers called the event a tomfoolery convention of Aunt Nancy's and brawling women.
Aunt Nancy's?
Well, yes, that was a derogatory name they gave the men who supported us.
I thought they were called male Bettys.
Well, yes, that too. Or was that what they called the men who liked our bloomers? Oh, we must keep these names straight. It's oh so important.
Miss Anthony, you were raised Quaker and then became a Unitarian. What are your religious beliefs?
I pray every day with my work. My prayer is to lift women to equality with men. Work and worship are the same with me. I know there is no God in the universe who cares if I get down on my knees.
Getting down on your knees?
Oh yes, that's right. I do not get down on my knees and pray every night.
So, if you don't pray at night, do you pray in the morning?
Well, almost every morning. As I told you, work and worship are the same with me, and on those rare mornings that I don't work, I don't pray.
Do you ever pray to God to help your cause?
Well, not in the way that you're thinking. I do not believe that God is responsible for our human ills, nor that we should believe or disbelieve in him on the basis of our misfortune.
Did you believe that when you were younger, say during your teaching days?
Well, of course not. Or at least if I did, I wouldn't have admitted it.
So what were your teaching years like?
When I was was 33, I attended the State Teachers Convention, which happened to be in Rochester. We women sat silently for 2 whole days, and when I could stand it not a moment longer, I asked to speak. You would have thought I asked permission to set the room on fire. The men debated for nearly an hour the question about whether I should be given the floor. They finally decided in the affirmative.
Grandma said something that was in the newspaper, I guess?
Oh, that convention was very covered. It was in all the papers all the time. Let me see. Oh, wait. Here it is. When responding to the gentleman's question, why the profession of teacher is not as respected as that of lawyer, doctor, or minister, Miss Anthony was finally allowed to give this response. It seems to me, gentlemen, that none of you quite comprehend the cause of the disrespect of which you complain. Do you not see that so long as society says women are incompetent to be a lawyer, minister, or doctor, but has ample ability to be a teacher, every man of you who chooses this profession tacitly acknowledges that he has no more brains than a woman? And this, too, is the reason that teaching is a less lucrative profession, as here men must compete with the cheap labor of women. Would you make it more lucrative? Increase the salaries of the women engaged in the noble work of educating our future presidents, senators, and congressmen? After that statement, there was stone cold silence. Nobody moved. And then 2 gentlemen raced down the aisle to shake my hands. But the women just sat there with sneers of disdain. Oh, there were lots of men who disapproved as well, but the looks on their faces were more of shock and bewilderment. The next morning, the chairman declared that there would be no more women speakers, as he did not want to drag women down from their pedestal and into the mud. Well, mud or not, for the next 3 years, I demanded, requested, lobbied, begged, chided, and I pleaded for the opportunity to be given to give a longer, more formal speech. They finally got tired of all my histrionics and said yes.
So tell me about that speech.
Well, I did already.
What do you mean?
You remember that time where I showed up at Mrs. Stanton's door, desperate for help? You remember.
Yes.
Its title became Educating the Sexes Together.
Yes, now I remember.
Well, as long as we're talking about that period, the next year I proposed that public education be made available to all Negro children.
Wow. You mean children of slaves also?
Well, even I realized that in 1857, 58, that I was not going to get educations for the children of slaves. And then there was that 4-year Civil War. Those were testy times for women's rights. Congress passed the 15th Amendment, and Negroes had the right to vote. Oh wait, excuse me, I told a lie. Only Negro males had the right to vote. That war helped the Negro cause, but it set back women's suffrage for at least a generation. My good friend Frederick Douglass and I were enemies for a while. He thought the freedom of black males was more important than the freedom of all women, white or black. We mended our fences, though. Mr. Douglas delivered the eulogy at my father's funeral, and then I delivered the eulogy at Mr. Douglas's funeral. I guess you could say we've come around full circle, and now I'm the only one left. And my circle's going to close very soon.
Ms. Anthony,
Yes?
do you think you'll live to see women get the right to vote?
No, I won't. It's going to happen, though. It's not going to take another 4-year civil war. We're marching in that direction, and we're going to get there. You know, people claimed that democracies would never work, but they have. People said that non-landowners were not smart enough to vote, but they were. People claimed that Negroes were not smart enough to vote, but they are. People say that women are not smart enough to vote, but it's just a matter of time.
Thank you for meeting with me, Miss Anthony.
Oh, think nothing of it. By the way, you look older than you did an hour ago. I lived 4 more years and died at the age of 86 in 1906. 14 years later, Congress passed the 19th Amendment, the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, granting women the right to vote.
Thank you. Be happy to take questions about anything about Susan B. or about our production, anything at all.
Did you have children?
No. I was close with Mrs. Stanton, though, and spent time with her children. And, you know, I was a little too busy to have children. Yeah.
My husband heard on TV, he was watching something a few days ago, that Susan B. Anthony's sculpted face was supposed to be put on Mount Rushmore, but they ran out of funds.
Wouldn't that be fun, huh?
Is it not true?
I don't know. I'd have to look that up. That would be fun. I don't know. I mean, you know, issues of gender are still very rampant, and I don't know when the people who decided those faces to go on that, you know, what.
I'm sure some women had that idea. I'm
Yeah,
sure it was
I'll bet.
discussed.
I mean, I got a coin. Yes.
How did you support yourself so that you could do the important work that you did?
She was often in debt. You know, that $10,000 debt at that time, it's like a lot of money then. She was on the circuit a lot. She did, you know, have benefactors, but she was not a fancy person. It was interesting though, I was just, when we wrote this, when Peter wrote this mostly, we did a lot of research then, and then I sort of have let things go by as I'm working in my regular life, and I go back. You know, she was Quaker and very proper and very stern looking, but she also had a vain side, which was sort of interesting. She had been given a bright red shawl that somebody gave to her because they were not allowed to wear it. It was considered improper. And she loved wearing it. And the newspapers were always, I actually did do some research. I got into the Boston Public Library and into their archives and the Library of Congress, and you can actually read digitized images of the newspapers of the time. They almost always spoke about what the women and the male speakers also, what they were wearing as they started their, you know, yeah, they still do, and it was sort of, you know, they would really be, but there was a little agreement. The newspapers enjoyed seeing Susan B. Anthony wearing that red shawl, and she didn't wear it once, because she did at one point, you know, decide to go to white, and, you know, it was more proper. And the newspaper said that they wouldn't cover her until she got it. And so she sent somebody back to the hotel to get it. So it's just one of those, she had those little quirks, which was sort of fun. But she was very driven and determined.
Have you been to the museum in Western New York?
I have not. I think, summertime. I'm a teacher year round, so, I those precious windows, but I would like to go in the summer.
Yeah. Actually,
Have you been there?
Well, I haven't been. My wife was there.
Yes?
And her friends. It's, the whole place of Susan B. Anthony in the history of Western New York is really significant.
Yeah.
And that whole movement between the movement for Frederick Douglass led and Susan B. Anthony, it was a very liberal area in many respects.
Right.
So I think you'd be very interested to go.
Yeah, I would
Yes.
like to, yeah. And
I'm from Rochester.
Are you?
So yes,
you
I think you
recommend
would enjoy it.
Okay, there you go.
Road trip.
Road trip.
Road trip.
More research. The other thing I found in the reading is I didn't realize that the western part of the country was more supportive of women's rights for a period of time, and that she often was traveling across the country. And I mean, traveling in those days, she was older, she was not very healthy, and she was always taxing her health. She was traveling by stage and heading out west, and she also went to Europe. Frederick Douglass did as well. There was a lot of conversation going back and forth with Europe, and there was a lot of support there as well. But I found I grew up in Ohio and I didn't know any of this stuff, so now that I read more, I find it fascinating how different areas of the country, because of their history and what was happening, it shaped their political beliefs as well, and how that works. These are things you never learn in school that you need to learn.
The other thing I was going to mention to you, when we were up around Rochester at one point, we went to a presentation that's very much like what you're doing.
Oh.
Yeah, which involved Frederick Douglass and Susan B. Anthony.
Nice.
And that whole movie was very interesting. It was in a small town near Rochester, and I don't remember the name of the small town. It's not where the museum was, actually.
Okay. Well, and the script today was written by Peter, and I just helped him shape it for me.
Well, that's helpful.
Yeah, we revised it a few times.
Well, very good.
Thank you. Yes?
I was trying to think before I came, where was the conventions? In Seneca, maybe?
Seneca was one of
The
them.
big one was Seneca Falls.
That's the one
Falls.
we learned about. And then, how many people were, do you know, how something
I
about?
brought some books.
Just
No,
tell a little bit
I don't
about
know. I actually don't know. Do you know more about that?
How many people at Seneca
Yeah,
Falls?
well, yeah, or when-
I honestly couldn't give you a number, but that sort of is
that's-
thought of as the big, moment for women finally coming together. 1848, if I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
I believe.
Okay, I didn't look. So, this is a nice one. Failure's impossible. I was looking at that today, and I was thinking I need to add that line into one of our spots because it would be good. Maybe we can find.
She would say failure is impossible.
Yeah, towards the end of her life, around that reminiscing stage, she knew it was going to happen. She knew it was not going to happen, and she would not see it. She did choose the person who she wanted to take over for her when she was no longer able to. She was in her 80s, and she was no longer able to keep going. And she told the woman that she wanted her to keep the presidency for as long as she was alive. And the woman said, I can't do that. It's the will of the people, who vote for me. And she said, oh no, you're going to have to do it so well that they want you forever. And that after I'm gone, I don't know about the hereafter, but I'm going to be around to advise you and inspire you. I was like, whoa, okay. Okay, I'm looking for Seneca Falls. So there's just this speech. Yeah. I don't know for sure. But
Ironically, she didn't have a big role in Seneca Falls. I mean, she was still 28, if my math is correct.
You're better at that right now than me. Yeah.
Seneca Falls,
Yeah.
she was what?
Back in that era, 83 years is a long lifespan.
Yeah, yeah. And she taxed herself, you know, she had a hard life, she worked hard, she was driven, she probably didn't take care of herself very well, and she, you know, kept going in spite of it, yeah. She's 86. Yeah. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.